what an honor it is to reconnect with a guy who gave me kind of a spiritual springboard over the last couple of months, just with his own aura and his own sort of vibe and his ability to just be a human being, which, when you reach certain levels of stardom and fame, oftentimes the ego can be very troublesome and get in the way. But my guest, maybe through his upbringing or just through his own spiritual nature, has learned to be a human and be good to people and be good to people around him, not just the people he cares about, but anybody. And we certainly need cats like that in the world today. If they happen to be great rhythmists as well, that doesn't hurt either. Chester Thompson, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Uh, Good to be here, man. It's great to talk to you again.
Such an honor, man. Um, can you talk about, do you feel like there was ever a time in your career or life where your ego was preventing you from really accessing true love and in the sense of like being a true spiritual being, somebody who could lead by example. Obviously, you were searching for um, Jesus and the Lord for a long time, and were making attempts at discovery. But even before that, do you just, was there a time that you remember where you just felt like you were really full of yourself, and and looking back on it, you got saved?
Of course.
I was waiting for you to say no. Never happened. Never happened.
No, I'd be lying. No, basically, I think the worst of it was when I was with Weather Report, near the end. I didn't grow up with a dad, and I think Zavanu I had a lot of respect for, but I think I started maybe emulating him a little bit, who's pretty brash and, he comes off as pretty egocentric. But that only works with Joe. I mean, because you end up loving him for it. I mean, there's something about the guy, even though he was that way. It was
Yeah,
just,
I
it was,
did.
it was
Yeah.
fantastic. But I think maybe I started going a bit that way, and it wasn't me. And Joe and I got along fine, but I've never. I think it kind of ticked Wayne off because Wayne was, you talk with Wayne, man, and he's always much more about your humanity than your playing, actually. And I think I got a little sidetracked for a while there. So when that ended, I don't think that was the reason it ended, but at the same time, it did not endear me to Wayne by any means. And I saw Jocko take on some of that. We didn't tour together, but we crossed paths. And yeah, I don't know what his growing up situation was like. You never hear much about his parents, but yeah, he started. And like I say, Joe was Joe, and it just, I mean, he was such a cool guy. You kind of almost wanted to be like Joe, But it's like,
Dude, I understand. No, I mean, this
you,
is,
yeah, you got to find who you are, and that, and I mean, growing up, I was all, I worked with these guys who I was pretty shy. I mean, I was, yeah, didn't have much confidence at all growing up, actually. I mean, when I'm behind the kid, I felt pretty good, but other than that, I never felt like I had much of anything going on. It was, pretty introverted, but really shy. Never, was work with, very often work with these really good looking guys that would pull all the ladies, and I was horrible at that kind of stuff. I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't me.
right. No, I
And
dig.
so I kind of had a little bit of an inferiority complex, I think. And yeah, it just so fortunately my big heads section was pretty short-lived, I think, but I definitely went through it. Yeah, I definitely had to realize, oh man, this is not the way to be. This is not who I am.
You know, I just a lot for. I mean, he left the planet. I think this year or last year, maybe. But what can you go, especially for younger cats who are searching musically. You talk about Wayne leading or more interested in the humanity of it than the music itself, except the when you cultivate that humanity, then you have more of a story to tell in your
Hmm.
playing. Um, was there an example of something that you could, a conversation you had? Because I mean, you're talking about almost like, I mean, Wayne, I remember talking to Dee Dee Bridgewater, and she was like, at like 8 years old, he was at the dinner table and he'd be like, yeah, it's the United Snakes of America. He was very Zen-like. He's like, he had a very, obviously he was a chanter and he was into Buddhism, but,
Hmm.
and Joe was a braggadocious, although, I mean, I guess it was just who he was. It wasn't like he was trying to put on an act. But as
Right. Oh,
far as
exactly.
it's just
Exactly.
like that's why you wanted to be like him because he was totally authentic himself. But if you had a great Wayne Shorter story, I'd love to hear it. Just about his humanity over the chops per se.
I think maybe I might have shared with you my absolute favorite Wayne Shorter story that I've never heard anybody else ever mention was, we were rehearsing the music for Black Market before we went in the studio. And and then it was interesting because as free as that music was, everything was written and not that easy to read actually because of it was so spaced differently from everything else. And that first day of rehearsal, we're in there, and and basically for some reason we're in this rehearsal room, but there were no music stands around, which I thought was pretty strange.
I love it.
So,
Yeah.
right, so like I said, all of our charts are on the floor, and so everybody's just kind of looking down and playing the music. But before we started, Wayne just got this look in his eye. I'd have to say it was a twinkle in his eye, really. And he says, I know, let's run over the music. And I didn't know if there was a ritual. I didn't know if there was a ritual or not, but everybody, basically him and Joe, quickly got to their feet, and we literally ran over the music.
Oh my God, this is cool. Let's run it. Oh, let's run it down, man.
I thought that was pretty hilarious, actually. But no, conversations with Wayne, like you said, I mean, he had some, like you said, he had some pretty different points of view. It's kind of, and he kind of spoke like he played, like his playing had involved this thing where he'd play a group of notes that were amazing, then he'd stop, and there'd be all this space, then there'd be another sort of flurry of notes. But he actually spoke that way as well,
He
and
did. That is fascinating
and
because I see that, man. It's like he'll just stop. It's like it's almost like syntax.
right.
Yeah.
But what he's saying usually it's usually pretty deep, so you really want to hear because he spoke pretty quietly actually. He wasn't loud at all. And so yeah, so you basically sort of lean in almost because you didn't want to miss what especially what was coming next. And he had this way of I wish I could remember exact conversations, but you would feel like he's going, wait a minute, he's changing gears, he's going in a different direction. But then the next statement would tie it all together. So it's like,
I
okay.
love that. Yeah, he's tying every. Oh man, yeah, that's so. With looking back, do you feel like, um, you know, was there? Obviously, you were playing with older cats, slick guys in Baltimore growing up, but was there even not a musician per se, but was there, looking back, were there fatherly figures for you that kept you? Although you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you were necessarily somebody who was seeking out trouble. I mean, you said that one of
Right.
the bars that you and O'Donnell played at, you're like, I wouldn't be caught dead there unless I had a gig there. So
Right.
I mean, you weren't naturally, your natural inclination wasn't to be a rabble rouser, but
No, no, not
looking
at all.
back on it, I mean, even a pastor, I don't know, a teacher. I mean, were there people that took you under your wing and at least put you on the road to becoming a man?
Not really. The closest thing to that, my very first drum set teacher was a close friend of one of my older brothers who was in the military at the time. And so, I kind of remembered him. I knew him, but not well. But one time my brother was home on leave from the military, and so he came around and there was kind of a reconnecting, and it came up that had just started taking drums in school. I was in the school band. I think I was in like eighth grade by then or something. And yeah, and it turns out, he was playing drums, and he was at a point in his life where he had done the soul music gigs, and he was just dedicated to playing jazz. He didn't want to do anything but really advance in playing jazz.
Wow.
So he made the mistake of telling me whenever I wanted a drum set lesson, I could come to his house. So I rang his bell literally at 9 o'clock every morning because this is this is during the summer,
Right.
and he put on albums and explained to me, what to listen for, where to put the time, where the feel should be, and I'd play along with albums by Miles and Max Roach and Art Blakey, and he would just, we'd go through this very, I mean, a lot of the things he taught me were things that I taught, when I teach, it's things that I still very much teach. They were very right on and very important things. And but he left maybe a couple of years after that. Him and his group ended up going to New York. They didn't actually get to make it as a band, and he ended up soon after that. He had a daughter that needed to come and live with him, and so he had to take a job that kind of was hard on his hands, and he didn't actually really get to fully pursue his dream. But
Hmm.
he made a big difference, but wasn't much of a presence in my life. My mom at one point uh, checked with Big Brother organization because she realized I needed a man in my life, but there was there were no volunteers. There was not enough volunteers, so no one came forth. So and she was great, but yeah, I think that had something to do with the lack of confidence. Like I said, I was 13 when I started doing the club gigs, and so when my youngest son, turned 13, I came off the road. It was like because I was doing like a Genesis tour 1 year, Phil the next year, and back and forth. And at the end of the Genesis tour and well, at the end of the Phil tour in '92, my son was about to turn 13, and I basically let Phil know I wouldn't be doing. Actually, it was into the Genesis tour. I let Phil know that I wasn't going to be doing his next solo tour, and because I just needed to be home with my son, and because I didn't want him to go through that lack of confidence that I went through from not having a male figure in my life, at that crucial age. Um,
How did
but no,
you, I mean, looking like, what were some of the things that you, not having a really any role models to speak of, you didn't really have a roadmap on being a father. I mean, not, being a father to your son. And I just, when you took some time off the road, which, that's a monetary consideration and all those types of things. Like, what kinds of things did you do with him? I mean, were you picking him up at school? Were you playing sports? Is it just having talks
oh,
about girls? Like, what was
well,
what was,
just being there for him. I mean, I went suddenly from being, from being up till 3 and 4 in the morning, sleeping as late as I could, for time to go to the airport, to I
right.
reached a point where I felt really weird sleeping in when he had to get up and go to school. So I just made sure to be up before he had to be up. So we all had breakfast together and just spending lots of time with him. A year after that is when we ended up moving to Nashville. And had I taken, had I not pulled off of Phil's tour, then after being here for a few months, I would have been on an 18-month tour, you know.
Relentless. I mean, that can
Yeah.
eat you alive too. I mean, that's
Well,
incredible.
yeah, yeah, apparently everybody hated everybody else at the end of that tour, but because it's just too much. But no, that now, like I say, unfortunately, I have not. Well, not. It's not. I have an older son. That's not unfortunate. You have the older son. The unfortunate part was that I was too young to know how to be a father to him. So I was on the road. Oh goodness, all the time. I mean, trying to make a living because went. I could make more traveling than I could in Baltimore. So I was, still trying to help support him and stuff, support that relationship and make sure he was cared for. So So he was born when I was 18. Like I said, I was never much of a party guy. I was never like, that was just never part of my life. But starting doing clubs since I was 13, I didn't really relate to girls my own age either, because I never went to a party or had a girlfriend or anything like that, because I wasn't going to miss a gig to go to a party or a dance.
That's right. I love it too.
And
At least there
they
were a
could
lot of gigs, that's
right
a good thing.
right when they couldn't come where I was on the weekend, so I just did not have a teenage life really.
What I mean, we're talking like this is around the time of being going on the road with McGriff and O'Donnell and those cats. Is that right? I mean, when your son was born?
Well, even before that, I mean, we had a couple of cover bands that were really good, and we ended up with a booking agent that would, man, we'd have to call this guy, say, can you just cancel? Like, don't book anything else. We need to go home. This guy would just keep you out there working. It was interesting. We were doing soul music in the late '60s, playing white clubs in the South, because that's the only way we could make enough money to afford to be out there. But it was. And we just were gone constantly. I mean, I think, yeah, my very first road trip, I think the year I got out of high school, that December, it was just a one nighter. We went to it, ended up going to Atlanta, which turned into a 6 week run. We went and sat in at a club, and they liked us so much they brought us back a couple of months later. And we would go every year for 6 weeks. And there were a couple of places like that. There was one in Denver that was like that as well. And back in those days, clubs, you had music 5 and 6 nights a week in clubs. So that was kind of the norm then. It wasn't the one nighters didn't come until I started doing concerts like, with Zappa. Well,
Right.
actually, I take that back. With Macduff, it would sometimes it would be a week, but a few times it would be a one-off. But most of it would be you would be in a jazz club for a week or so.
The other the other cat that just popped into my head before we got on here, I was like, I there's no way these cats did not cross paths. I mean, can you talk to me about any experience you had with running into Miles Davis?
Only time I met Miles, I was playing with Weather Report.
Oh
And
boy. Yeah,
yeah,
this is great.
so he came to the show. And it was really amazing because as confident and as strong as Joe and Wayne were, suddenly they were little kids when Miles was there. It was like Dad's here.
Miles is here. No, that's what Brecker told me. He's like, when he was talent scouting, there'd just be a whisper going through the club, like, Miles is here. Miles, I mean, everybody
Oh,
was in awe of that cat.
oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. We didn't have a lot of interaction. He was very complimentary of my playing, which I appreciated.
Oh, sweet.
And yeah, I ran into him one other time. I got to, actually it was after the Grammys in LA one year. Did the Grammys with Phil Collins, and he wasn't he was there. He had gone to the Grammys. I don't think he played. I don't think he had anything up, but he was there. I mean, there was, I think Whitney Houston was on that year, and there was this crazy drum thing that happened. I think the opening of the show was Buddy Rich and Tony Williams
Whoa,
playing with a big
whoa,
band,
whoa.
and they had invited Phil to do it, and Phil was like, "No way, am I getting going up there with those guys out of respect for him?" It's like, "No way, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not that kind of player." And so yeah, but so Miles happened to be there. We ended up in my wife and I went to a restaurant afterwards, and Miles and Cicely happened to be there, Cicely Tyson.
Wow.
So got to sit with him a little bit and talk a little bit, not a lot, but that were my only encounters with Miles actually.
We talked. First question I asked you in our first interview, and you were so eloquent about Elvin, Elvin Jones, and I was one of the L's on my show is lineage, and I just I wanted you to talk about the influences going farther back in the lexicon of music, and maybe I'm just curious how far you go back. I mean, I just wrote down a few
Mm.
drummers here.
Well, the very
Buddy Johnson, Sonny Payne, Earl Palmer. I mean, not that these guys, accompanists weren't even on record, so it's hard to know who was playing. But how
exactly
far back in the lineage were you like listening to Sid Catlett, and like how far back did you go?
Oh no, no, I wish I'd known about, to do that.
Yeah, I know.
No, the very first drummer that uh, through these lessons I was getting, the first drummer that made a big impact was Max Roach,
Yes.
and so listen to a lot of his stuff. Um, I wasn't, like I say, I wasn't very rebellious as a kid. And I think the fact that he was one of the first known jazz drummers to actually go in and get a master's degree and even incorporate timpani on in some stuff he did, that made a huge impact. I think then Art Blakey, and then, like I said, when it came to Elvin, that changed everything. Um, but I didn't know much about the history at that point. Well, there was a concert series before the harbor in Baltimore got really built up. When they were starting to build it up, they started having concerts down there. So I did get to see Count Basie, and I'm trying to remember. And I think did I see? I think I saw Duke Ellington. No, I think it was Count Basie, Rufus Speedy Jones. I guess they
Yeah,
called him.
yeah, totally. Joe
Got to see
Jones. Yeah.
him. Got to see Buddy Rich. I got to see. It was a sort of a neighborhood park concert. Dizzy, and I'm trying to, what's the drummer that played with Dizzy?
It was like Candy Finch or something,
No, no, oh man,
or Mickey Roker.
Mickey Roker. Oh my
Oh my
goodness.
God, dude, that dude.
Wow,
One
that,
of my first interviews ever. Rest in peace. I love that. I've been to that dude. Holy cow, man. Next,
yeah. So I
next
got to
level.
see him like, standing real close. I mean, I got, that, but yeah, like I say, it was, and they didn't put a lot of, if it wasn't jazz, you didn't really find out who was playing on the other stuff. Like, I didn't really know much about Earl Palmer until later years, and I got to meet him in LA actually, and it was man, I was doing a session with Zappa with a bunch of horns and stuff, and this was at Capitol Records, and he was in another studio, and so I went next door, and he was doing basically a movie track. It was a chase scene in a movie, and man, he was driving that thing. Oh my goodness, But
Oh my.
I didn't know his history till later. I mean now, I mean because I didn't know who he was. I mean he came over and introduced himself and said said he liked my playing and stuff. And it's so funny. It's like, when I went and heard him and I was saying to him, man, yeah, you sound really great. And
Yeah, you sound good, man.
well, right. And I mean, but I had no idea of
Exactly. No, I get it.
who he was and, his status as a player. So, you know, it was like he looked at me kind of like, really? He wasn't impressed. And the only contact with him beyond that, really, he ended up being the treasurer at the Musicians Union in LA.
Oh boy. Oh my God.
So I'd haven't so then I'd get to talk to him sometime. Then I started to find out more about what he had done and stuff. And it was like, man, you knucklehead, you had no clue, but I really
Well, I
didn't.
mean, give yourself,
Didn't
but
know.
and that was the other thing is that I would assume just being in that mid-Atlantic, I mean, there were bleed through channels. I remember Calvin Keys talking about growing up in Omaha, and there'd be, station, on a good clear night, you get stations from New Orleans.
Right.
So
Well, there was
sometimes you'd
one.
hear, yeah,
There was one from Rochester.
yes, Harry Abramson or something, I think his name
Yeah,
was.
it was an AM station, but I'd get it in Baltimore sometimes.
And
It was
so
like,
you'd hear the music, but of course
oh
they
yeah,
weren't like reading off like the
right,
accompanist,
right. Well, Baltimore had this. I think we talked about this. There was a local organization called the Left Bank Jazz Society.
We haven't talked about the left bank. I would love you to talk about that.
And they did this concert series Sunday. I think it was maybe once a month, a Sunday. They would bring in this like all these name players, man, from New York. They would be like the real deal. And it was, and it's so funny because as I got to meet a lot of the players years later, they'd find out I'm from Baltimore, and the first thing they'd ask about was Left Bank Jazz Society, which was hilarious to them because they take the train down. They didn't, they take the train down. The gig was near the train station, actually. It was this room they would rent, all purpose kind of place that was in the same place every time. And people would show up with their boxes of chicken. It was like an indoor picnic,
Dude, I
jazz
love this.
jazz
No, because
concert.
well, no, the brilliant thing is that somebody had a rig, and all those concerts were recorded. A lot of that stuff has come out in public. Jimmy Heath
Oh,
from there.
really? Now, see, I've not that I'm not even aware.
I'm
I
gonna
think,
I'm gonna send you all these insane, dude. Roy Brooks live from the left bank. Jimmy Heath,
wow.
Woody Shaw. I mean, that place was.
Oh, it was amazing. Now, during those years when it was really going is when I started traveling a lot. So I missed a lot of it because I just wasn't there.
Right, right.
Those mid '60s, mid to late '60s, I was just gone a lot.
So even in the mid
Whenever I was
'60s,
home,
yeah,
I'd make sure to go to whatever the concerts were. I remember seeing Jackie McLean, and I think Alphonse Mouzon was playing with him,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
Stanley Clark, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, so let me
Yeah,
think of
he might
kids.
have been going by Stan Clark at that time.
He might have been. I mean, really young. We're talking really young guys at that point. I mean, I mean, I guess I think I'm maybe a couple of years older, but I was blown away seeing these guys playing with these named players. I got to see Elvin live. I got to see Max live. I got to see a lot of people live. There at those concerts.
Is it? I'm going to go on a limb here, but I just remember Mike Knock, the piano player, telling me when he was at Berkeley, which was kind of around the time that you were in the post bop space rock bebop
Mhm.
band. Excuse me. Was Tony Williams in Boston when you were there?
Was it what now?
Was Tony Williams living in Boston when you were up there?
I don't know. I don't think so.
The
I
one, yeah,
was
well, because the other cat that I think I did you cross paths with Alan Dawson at all?
I never did, and I've kicked myself ever since.
That's a
Because
gaping hole for Chester Thompson there.
I mean,
Yeah,
I knew who he was,
yeah.
and everything in me wanted to try to find how to reach him to try to get some lessons with him while I was there. And like I say, I mean, I was painfully shy about doing stuff like that. And I mean, when I got to meet Tony, he was very warm and sort of welcoming, and I was too busy being fanboy to really spend time with him. I was so enamored of his playing and stuff.
When did you meet him first? Do you remember?
Oh goodness, when I
I mean,
actually
was it on
met
one of
him,
these, like maybe
this
like
would
at the Village Gate or something?
this would have been after Weather Report when I actually
Oh
first met
wow.
him. Yeah, yeah, when I first met him, it would have been after Weather Report. So, I mean, again, so he knew who I was, and I mean, so it was kind of like, it's kind of like when you play with guys like Wayne and Joe, you're suddenly you're in the club to a point of the Miles Alumni Club. And
Yeah,
even though I
the
had
Blakey Miles Alumni Club. I love it,
right,
man.
right, even though I hadn't played with Miles, playing with those guys, I was kind of accepted and respected even. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I mean, but yeah, I remember as a kid meeting Max and just very shy. I had to go up and say something to him, and I just let him know I was a player and all that, and he was very gracious. And I try to really reach out to kids when I run into it myself, because the thing that made my life that year was when it was all over. I was about to leave, and Max remembered my name and said, hey, see you later, Chester. And it was like I was done. It was like,
Wait, I'm sorry. Which year was this?
oh, we're talking 68 maybe,
And,
67, 68, something like that.
oh my, and wait, and you at that point you were just sort of taking it all. You were off the road and you were watching him
Yeah, I
play.
was
And
right. I was home between, well, actually, that might have been before I started going on. No, yeah, even when I was in high school, I did sometimes on Sundays go to those because they were always in the afternoon and always played the evening. So sometimes I did get to go to those.
yeah, I'm going to send you a bunch of links because I mean everything. There was a series. I mean, going back 20 something, 30 years,
Wow.
live from the left bank. Everything was recorded. Everything.
Oh, that's amazing. That is, man, I would love to get some of that stuff. Because, like I say, the things I got to see there, it was mind blowing. I mean, it just, 'cause it was just, you know,
It was
yeah.
totally progressive at the time. I mean, it was still
Oh,
pop
goodness,
music.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it wasn't just like, okay, let's just bring in the ones that are like, on the jukeboxes that got the hits. No, they would bring in the serious players. I mean, whether they,
Yeah, the Blue Note Cats.
yeah. I mean, it was, and the audiences would be really in it, man. I mean, people, they had ears, you know.
Um, I have to ask you, I mean, part of me, uh, I just couldn't believe this, and I've never seen this album. But and I don't, I think his name is it Johnny Little or Lytle? I never know how to pronounce his
Oh,
last name.
the vibe player, I think it was pronounced Lytel or something like that.
Lytle. So, I mean, I know that I mean, you played the last gig at Gary Bartz's bar with O'Donnell. Did
Right.
you ever play? Obviously, you recorded with Lytle and Albert, but did you play with Albert Daly ever in Baltimore?
No, not ever. No, never. I met him, I think I met him in LA through Jimmy Hops, as a matter of fact.
Oh
Because
my, dude, you wait, how did you cross paths with Hops, dude? That dude, Stanley Cowell, man,
well,
that stuff is
right.
burning.
Webster Lewis was real close with Jimmy and all those guys. They were all
Wow.
close with Webster. But first heard Jimmy. I went to a gig in DC, and I think the headliner, I think we didn't show up. I think was it Aretha or somebody that didn't, we went, I mean, I was a huge Aretha fan long before she went to Atlantic and did the rock stuff. I was a big fan of her jazz stuff.
You're doing trio stuff,
And
you know? Yeah.
O'Donnell Butch and I, we went over to try and see her in DC. Was it the Cellar Door? I'm trying to remember which club it was. But anyway, she didn't show. Uh, no, that was Bernard Sweetney. We heard. I don't know if you ever heard of Nathan Page, the guitarist,
Oh my God, you know, absolutely.
and Bernard Sweetney, the drummer. They played with a guy named, I think the organist was Garland Butts, if I remember correctly.
Jeez, oh my God.
It was mind blowing. Oh my goodness! But I went to hear someone else over there. And again, the headliner didn't show. I can't remember who it was, but Jimmy Hops was playing with a band there, and it just blew me away. It's like, whoa, this. And we got to be friends. Actually, no, I guess before Webster, I knew Jimmy because we had met, and my first trip to Japan, he was living there. And so, I reached out to him, found that somehow I had a number for him. I guess no, maybe this was after Webster, actually, yeah. But I think I met Jimmy before Webster, though. But anyway, I had heard his playing, and I was very impressed with him. And I was playing in Japan the first time I went, and he came over to the hotel, and we visited for a while. Um, we just stayed in touch. He turned me on to some stuff playing concept playing wise that was really was really major stuff that was you know yeah we got to be close enough that sometimes we talk drums. Usually it's like like a lot of guys, he was way into movies. I mean, he loved Clint Eastwood movies, which was like which was pretty funny. But at one point, I was on the road and he needed a place to stay in LA, so I invited him to stay at my place while I was up in San Francisco that summer. So,
I wanted to read you this quote because I have a feeling I could be wrong, and you can tell me, but I feel like one of the reasons you might have moved to Nashville was because of this quote that I'm about to read from Ernie Watts. And he said,
oh,
in 1980, the synthesizer entered the pop music world, and it was the new toy. Drummers like Harvey Mason, they were making their money from programming drum machines. They learned how to work those machines, and they were putting those tracks on pop records and some fusion records because that was the sound of the day. The
hmm
bass became a keyboard bass for a little while. All the string sections became synthesized. All the brass stuff became synthesized. You couldn't sample a saxophone sound. It's got too many overtones in it. Yamaha wanted to synthesize my sound and they were going to give me a fee, but they weren't going to give me royalties. They wanted to pay me a flat fee to synthesize my sound and put it in one of their computers, but they only wanted to pay me one time. Got down to the point in the early 80s that I would be the only acoustic player on a record. The music business totally changed in 82 and 83. And I don't think you moved to Nashville maybe till the early 90s, but and you were not a studio shark. I mean, it wasn't Hal Blaine, Chester Thompson, Jim Keltner, uh, uh, Jim Gordon. You were touring with iconic bands. But
Yeah.
I wonder about this idea of, I mean, did anybody ever approach Chester Thompson to have you record drum samples for them?
Oh yeah, several times.
The
I mean,
earliest memory of that was when?
oh, I don't know. I wouldn't do it.
Right, of course.
I don't, I mean that would have been it would have been 80s, late 80s. And then since then it's been like, loops, would you record some loops, and it's like, and there's some guys who have done well with that, and I just always felt funny about it, and I mean, probably short-sighted on my part
No,
because
no. Why do you? I
it,
want you to talk about the lack of authenticity. What do you feel? What made you? You're not the only one. Dean Park said no.
right, yeah.
I'm just saying for guys in the studio, how demoralizing it must have been to. Again, you
Oh, it
weren't.
was a drag. It was a drag. I remember when the Lynn drum machine came out. That was the first one where they were using real drum sound, and that rocked everybody's world. I remember several conversations with drummers in LA. We were all sort of crying the blues. But the funny thing is, all of a sudden, most of my sessions I was getting called for was to replace drum machines. Uh, because they finally had to accept the fact, okay, these things have no real feel. I mean, yeah, you can program all the right notes. If a drummer programs it, yes, you got a chance of maybe making it feel authentic, but it was all keyboard players doing all the program for the most part, doing all the programming. One guy even called me, I got paid double scale to just go in and add hi-hat to an existing drum machine part to try to warm it up, to try to make it feel more
Wow.
natural. Yeah, so it was like, yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because I've dabbled in a lot of electronics. I mean, I did quite a bit with electronic drums, and I mean, I've always been a little bit of a geek. I love computers and programming and all that kind of stuff. When it's time, I mean, I've not my own recordings that I've done have all been live though. I'm not interested in trying to. I mean, and it's fun. I mean, it can be fun to play with that stuff. When I was doing a lot of drum clinics, I played around with the idea of programming something for me to solo over, and I did it a couple of times and then stopped doing it. I much prefer to just play live, and without tracks. So, um,
Was that an impetus because they were still making records the old school way in Nashville? Was that one of the impetuses for you to go
no,
there?
my moving to Nashville had nothing to do with music
Man,
whatsoever.
interesting.
No, it looked like a good family move.
Yeah.
I loved LA when I lived there for the most part. The first 18 years were great. The last couple of years I started getting a little restless. Um, I think life points you in a direction, and you
Hmm.
either go for it or you don't. But I came to Nashville to go to a funeral of a drummer friend of mine, a guy named Larry London, who was like the top session player at the time. But Pearl Drums used to send us out to do drum clinics together, and we got to be really good friends.
Larry
And
London. Wow.
yeah, what a player. This guy was amazing, man. And unfortunately, he was in the middle of a big band record that he was recording with live players in Nashville, and it never came out. He never got a deal for it. I guess his son is still sitting on the tape somewhere. I've got to ask him about it, but I mean, it was mind blowing how good it was. It was like, what? People assumed he was a country guy, but he had the deepest groove, man. The guy was
Oh my
amazing.
God. Was he, and he was an LA based cat.
No, no, he was a Nashville guy.
He was
I
a
guess he had
Nashville guy. All right.
Yeah, he had lived in Detroit at one point. He was actually on staff at Motown. Very Gordy never let it be known in those days that there were white musicians on some of those sessions. He never let that be made public. But Larry played on several things up there. Bob Babbitt, bass player here, I played with him a lot when I got here. He was a part of the Funk Brothers thing, the Motown rhythm
So
section
you're
thing.
blowing my mind. You and Babbitt cooked the groove in the studio together?
Oh
Or,
goodness, yeah. Yeah, we did
oh.
a bunch of stuff here.
Well,
Um,
they had, because it was Babbitt and then it was Dennis Coffey and Jack Brokenshaw, from Australia. Those cats,
wow.
the Funk Brothers that were. It's
Yeah.
interesting that did you ever cross paths? I know he had a really. It's funny. He's just been in the zeitgeist with me. As another guy who really his life became unraveled around the time of you being in Weather report was James Jamers.
Never got to meet him. No.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
I
he
mean,
was.
give me a break. I mean, that's
That
see again,
that guy
that's
was amazing, man. Wow.
again,
Yeah.
you're hearing that Motown stuff as a kid growing up, and you have no idea who's playing in the rhythm section. You're hearing this stuff on the radio, and it always comes in a latent fashion. One thing I wanted to ask you because you made this, it was just so fitting and it's so classic that you said this. That Wayne Shorter story about let's run through the music, let's run on the music, and because there were no music stands, and we have this incredible jazz club here in Tucson in this funky town called the Century Room. And we have this young farm system of incredible cats, young bands, incredible concepts, and and then obviously live music has changed a lot, but these guys are really good players. They have their vocabulary. They know what they're doing. They have their own sound. And yet it's a small bandstand and there are music stands everywhere. Like, and they're playing really complex music. They're playing Chester
Right.
Thompson back in, post bop, bebop music. I mean, it's wild, and yet it's like a younger generation. I'm 46, but even younger cats like they want that security blanket. And I just remember Gary Bartz, great Baltimore cat. He told me, man, if McCoy or Train saw a music stand on the bandstand, they said this isn't a gig, this is a rehearsal you know, no music stands. And I just wonder in your live playing, when you play live with your own groups, when you're a leader, I mean, do you have a no music stand policy? Because actually, it's funny. I mean, Wayne, you guys were learning very complex music. It was the first time you were seeing the music, and there
Right.
weren't any music stands in there. But there was no music stands on the Weather Report bandstand.
Oh no, not at all.
And I just
Uh,
wonder what your philosophy is about that because for some of these guys, you know what it is? The minute I don't care if you have everything under your fingernails, the minute you look down at that iPad, you're out of the zone. You're gone. You're not there anymore.
well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Tell me what's going on. I mean, because
Well, I mean, if you do enough session work, if you really do a lot of session work where you're reading, you learn to you know, between the charts and the click, you would think, okay, yeah, it can do that. It can take you out of the magical thing. But I remember recording with Abe Laboriel Senior, the bass player.
I love the man so much, dude.
So him and I were doing a session together in LA, and I was still kind of getting used to the click. But Abe was so dead on the money, and his groove was so deep and perfectly with that click. It just hit me in a different way. It was like, okay, I need to step it up. I got to be able to do this. And a lot of the thing about Nashville, having been here for a while, no place I've ever been records as fast as they do here. Everybody is so used to recording. When we go in the studio here, if you got a double session, you're not going to come out with less than probably 4 or 5 tunes.
Wow.
Good tracks. There's no such thing as a wasted day in the studio here where nobody gets anything. Where I had a few of those in LA back in the day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Well, and that was like the producers trying to make up their minds, or could be technical stuff, but that just doesn't happen here. I mean, they're so used to it here. Grooves are good. Everybody just so used to being in the studio. You go to work and people coming from other cities and they're always blown away at how efficient it is in the studio here. But no, my coming here, like I say, I came in the day before Larry London's funeral. I rented a car. I got in the day before because I didn't want. I'd known, I had met his family and stuff, but I didn't want to be a burden on them. They had enough to deal with.
Right.
And he was a really popular guy. Everybody, all the musicians knew him and stuff. So I got in a day early. This is pre-GPS. So went to
Dude,
the
how did
gas
we get
station.
by, man? How did we
Right.
do it? Yeah.
Well, I did what you did. You go to the gas station, you get your map, you take a pen and you outline your
I
route.
love it.
You draw
Love
it
it.
on the map, you
Yeah.
find the streets and outline it. So I did that the day before. and just kind of fell in love with it. It's a pretty little town. I mean, it's now grown to be like a becoming a really major city. But if you get outside of downtown, it's still a really pretty town here. Lots of green, lots of trees, and it just blew me away because I was so missing that being in LA all that time because, you know, if it said if it was called a river here, it had water in it, you know. That's-
No,
that's-
I've been to Nashville a few years ago, and it's definitely getting bulked up. I mean, it's
oh,
at least
yeah,
the
it's
city
getting
part of
crazy
it.
now. It's
Yeah,
getting
it's
crazy.
insane, you
But
know.
but anyway, so I went back and it's like, you know, I was just taken with the place, and it's funny because Larry London had been saying to me, man, you know, if you want to, at one point he was getting tired of the studio. He ended up being music director with the Everly Brothers of all things, and he was
Wow.
loving being on the bus, being on the road again, you know. And he says, man, I'm getting tired of the studio. If you ever want to, you know, if you want to come down here, I'll set you up with some sessions and stuff. And it was, and my response was like, man, they're not gonna let me in doing these country sessions, you know, which would have been true at the time. I mean, it's changed somewhat now. It's like a mix of all kinds of people going in there and getting the job done. A lot of that stuff is, I mean, you still got some holdouts, but there's a lot of black musicians and other races that are, you know, doing some of this work now that are just great players. And
There is no color bar anymore.
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
a lot.
I mean, it's
Right.
not a.
It's a lot better than it was. It's like, yeah, some of the main, you know, country artists have their black rhythm sections or black drummers now, and it's just becoming the norm, you know. It's not the majority by any name, by any means, but yeah, that a lot of that old stigma seems to, well, we outnumbered the locals as well. Is part of
I
why.
love no, I really your perspective is so important, man, because it does show that we do make incremental progress. We're making
Yeah,
a little bit of progress here and
right.
there.
So
You
anyway, I
know,
went back. I
yeah.
said to my wife, "What do you think of Nashville?" And she said, "I don't."
I don't think about it. Yeah.
And but basically, you know, if we needed something done, if we needed a part for something, it just got really silly because everything, no matter what we needed, kept pointing to Nashville. It's like this is getting crazy. So finally, I got booked for a session down here, you know, and so I said to my wife and son, I said, "Okay, here's the deal. Why don't we go and we all go? I'll be in the studio, but you guys can go, you know, wander around the place and see what you think, you know." And there's some close friends of ours, the Omardian, Michael Omardian, big producer.
Wait. You're telling me, dude, he is one of my, I mean, we did an interview about 10 years ago.
Oh,
A
okay.
legend. Love that cat,
Oh
man.
yeah. Well, they we were neighbors in L.A. and
Oh my God.
well, no, and Stormy Michael's wife
Absolutely.
and my wife, they've had a prayer group together for over 35 years now. And you know,
Wow.
we could walk to their house from where we lived in L.A. And they still, it's, you know, they had, you know, my wife, I guess she went to the prayer group one day and she said to Stormy, I think my husband's lost his mind. He's talking about moving to Nashville. And Stormy goes, what? My husband's talking about moving to Nashville.
Oh, he's there
So
now. You guys are there now, right? I mean,
he came, he got here a month before we did. Yeah.
oh my dude. Are
So,
you telling you're not going to tell me that you were you guys working in the studio in LA together too?
I had only done one. The first time I played on a number one hit, Michael had called me for the session. It was the very first time I'd ever played on a number one hit, which was Peter Cetera and Amy Grant, Next Time
Oh
for Love,
my
I guess it was
God.
called.
Wow.
And I've done a few things
Wow.
with him here, but we tend to run in different circles here. You know, I'm more of a jazz guy here, and he, you know, he actually did. He produced some of the country stuff here, but he still, you know, most of what he does is from outside of here. You know, but but yeah, they were dear friends, and so as it turned out, we booked the tickets. We decided to all come. Session got postponed for me, and I said, well, you know what? Let's still go. That way, we'll see everything together. And you know, and a week later, we bought a house and registered my son in school, and went back to LA and started packing. We knew this was going to be home. You know.
That is that is absolutely magical. You know, as we enter into the holiday season, I mean, I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about what you are most grateful for, you know, in your as it relates to music. What is still inspiring for Chester Thompson. I mean, CT, I mean, you have played with the other Chester Thompson in Santana. You've ascended
Right.
the heights with. I mean, you played concert toms with Zappa. That's the greatest. We need to talk more about that. But I mean, really, man. I mean, you've really, and yet, there's what is still inspiring for you musically as we head into the holiday season.
Well, man, I just love to play the drums, man.
Simple, real simple. Yeah.
It's pretty, and I'm always more interested in the new thing, as opposed to looking. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
again.
Nobody wants to be so what's the new thing on you that you got front of mind that you're really loving?
Well, I mean, this last record that I did,
Yeah.
I think, did I get a copy to
You
you? I
say
think.
yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so basically, I was talking to them. I was talking to Michiko, who did probably most of the writing on that stuff, and we were talking, and it's her and her husband Pee Wee were just still dear friends, and I was saying to Michiko, would you be up to doing some more of this stuff? And she was like, "Oh yeah," because it took her in some new directions. She wouldn't have written the kind of stuff she wrote without the drum tracks that I sent. So she's really up for it, and Pee Wee, her husband. I mean, so there's probably going to be another. I'm not sure if we'll do it the same way remote, or I would love it if we could do it live. Maybe send the tracks ahead of time, send the drum tracks to start the ball rolling, or even do that live. I would love. LA is just so out of reach these days that, if you're not
It's
living.
out of and it's really it's kind of it's pretty dark out there now, man. I
Well,
mean, it's
just the cost of being there. I
oh
mean,
my God,
'cause,
exactly.
yeah, I mean, they always have a studio in their house, same as I always do. And like I said, they did it in their home studio. All their parts were done in their home studio. All the drums were done in my studio. And
But
then,
you're saying that
you know,
the rhythm in your rhythms in I don't say forced, but her song forms changed because of those rhythms.
well, basically, I mean, I think I told you. Basically, that whole album was done during COVID, and it
Right.
started with me sending them a drum track, just a group, just to jam with, and they wrote this tune on it around what I sent. And so we just kept it going. So, basically all of the 9 songs, all they got from me was, I did contribute to the melodies that she developed. But other than that, all they got was a raw drum track from me where I'm playing all kinds of breaks and hits and all kinds of stuff. Because, I mean, I can't even say it was planned. I would just sit down and play and just play till I stop. Each song happened that way. And they wrote around my fills and licks and all of that, and they took it places I would have never imagined it going.
Wow. Wow.
But I took a composition class once, and I'll never forget. It made so much sense to me. The teacher said, "Rhythm dictates melody, melody dictates harmony," and which is true. I mean, like, if you got a rhythm in your head or you hear a pattern or something, you're gonna play something very different. If you hear like a militaristic kind of snare drum, you might hear a melody in your head, but it's gonna sound, which is not gonna be the same as just all of a sudden you hear just funky shuffle groove. Obviously it's gonna bring about a different melody. And so that being the concept, that's what we did. So that rhythm, it was rhythm first, then melody, and then harmonizing the melodies.
Wow. I mean that yeah, that's except for the fact that you were not in the same room, that is definitely more of an old school approach to the
Right,
whole
but
thing.
again, but that band, we spent so much time together. I still say they probably know me better than anybody musically.
The one thing I actually have to I just got a message. I got to go get my younger daughter right now. But
Oh,
the one
okay.
thing I wanted to talk to you about down the road is Bingo Miki. Who is Bingo Miki,
What is this?
man?
Oh, bingo.
No, I don't even want to get into it right now. I don't have time. This is
Yeah,
on the inner. So, but I'm just saying, you met some cats in Japan that you
yeah,
wound up.
right. He was a ranger with a big band. My first trip to Japan was I was playing with the Pointer Sisters, and it was this it was called the Tokyo Music Festival. It's basically a song competition, and they had a house band. The drummer and I are good friends to this day. He was, AB Sawa is is his last name. Ibisawa song. Phenomenal drummer. Doesn't matter, jazz, funk, whatever.
Right,
Read
just
read
massive player.
anything.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just bonded, and Bingo Miki was he was on that session with the big band. I guess he wasn't the director. He was in that band, but he had a couple of big bands of his own and decided to come to LA, and I connected him with the Fowler brothers, and we ended up doing a couple albums in LA.
So, listen, I don't know if you have anything on the books, but I'll be in touch because I'm definitely coming to Nashville in the
Oh,
winter, and
great.
it would be cool. If there are any gigs that come up, please let me know. I'd love to come see you play live too. It'd be
And any
fantastic.
idea what month you thinking you're coming?
Honestly, whatever you think is makes sense. I mean, especially if it coincides with any kind of Chester Thompson music, that would be
Okay,
ideal.
well, see what's happening.
Yeah, let's stay in touch, man. But I just want to say, man, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and thank you for. I mean what you say, man. Like you, through your own spirit, put me on a. You and Alex put me on a really safe path. I feel very protected more than ever before, and I'm
Wow.
very grateful to you for that.
Hmm.
And there's really nothing, even in the 3 hours of conversations, it had nothing to do with words. It was all just sort of
Wow.
from above, man. So much
So
love to
yeah.
you, man. We'll be in touch.
So all right. Well, God bless you, man. Take care, and yeah, we gotta meet. We gotta hang.
No, we're hanging, dude. We're hanging in 25.
Take care. All
All
right
right,
now.
bro. Be cool.
All right. You
Bye.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.